Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything happening with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Daemon Hadfield, and joining me this week are Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hello.
And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Always a pleasure, gentlemen.
And this week we're talking about genres. We were wondering, what are the genres that are really dominating this generation of consoles? Which genres are winning? Which genres are losing? Which are sort of underrepresented, or maybe have even sort of seemed to have gone extinct this time around for PS5 and Xbox Series? And as I was putting this list together, I want to know what you both think of this. I think there are two main genres that are really, really sort of dominating the gaming conversation this generation, and that would be RPGs and open world / action adventure games. So your RPGs would include everything from your Final Fantasies, Baldur's Gate 3, even Cyberpunk, Phantom Liberty. We've had two Like a Dragons in the Yakuza series come out, even stuff like Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, Persona 3 Reload, smaller stuff like Tales of Arise, Octopath Traveler 2. The list keeps going. It's crazy time for RPGs. And then in the open world / action adventure area, this is Sony's bread and butter. So Spider-Man 2, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. But I would also throw in Deathloop, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Hogwarts Legacy, Psychonauts 2, in smaller indie games like Death's Door, It Takes Two, Tunic, and that list goes on as well. So first of all, I don't know, Ryan, what do you think? RPGs, open world, action adventure games, do you think those are sort of the main genres this generation?
Yeah, I don't think I could disagree, Damon. I mean, the open world game has been a thing for quite a while, and it continues to. I mean, we got Star Wars Outlaws coming up as I think it's the first single player Star Wars open world game.
I think so.
Galaxies, of course, was the MMO back in the day, but yeah, and certainly RPGs have been either the most dominant or like the 1B genre for years now. I'm old enough to remember back when RPGs kind of went away, like in the I'm talking, this is like MS-DOS, this is like the days of the ancients walking the earth kind of thing, but yeah, the RPG, I mean, I would say the RPG has been pretty much since the Xbox started, because JRPGs have certainly been big on every Sony console, every single PlayStation. But then the Xbox, I would argue, really kind of brought the Western RPG to the forefront, with starting with The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind on the original Xbox, and on up through Oblivion, Skyrim, and just a million other Western of KOTOR, Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, and on and on and on. But yeah, you're right. Like right now with Baldur's Gate 3 and Cyberpunk, the new one, the Phantom Liberty, and the other ones you mentioned, and stuff like Avowed is out in like 5 months after the recent little delay there. There's no shortage of role-playing games either now or probably any time in the last number of years.
What? So wait, I'm sorry. Are you agreeing or disagreeing with me?
Oh, totally agreeing on RPGs.
Okay, good.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought there was a but coming up. Max, what do you think?
Oh, I'm going to be difficult about this. I feel like there are definitely a lot of really good RPGs. I think we have seen the rise of the crunchy RPG in a mainstream audience. I think The Witcher 3 did a lot of heavy lifting in that department. Cyberpunk obviously hooked a lot of people in there. And those, these are games that are rooted in big, thick Polish fantasy novels and pen and paper board games. And you look at Baldur's Gate 3, the fact that found mainstream appeal, that was, widespread game of the year material for much more mainstream audience than you would have seen for the first few games, which were isometric PC games. They were definitely in that much more hardcore department. It's still a hardcore RPG, but I think it's more that gamers have gotten more open to the idea of RPG mechanics, largely because of how much RPG mechanics have been injected into like every other genre of gaming.
Good point.
Yeah, and this is tricky looking at this, because when you try to define what the genre of a game is, how much of that is just a prevalence of mechanics versus a proper genre versus a tonal choice? We talk about, one big debate that has always been going on, or it's sort of a debate. It's mostly people arguing on Twitter. But is Bloodborne a horror game? Like, it's got werewolves and various haunted houses and creatures of the night, and it's firmly rooted in Lovecraftian cosmic horror, but it's a Soulsborne action RPG. And then there's the further question: are Soulsborne's RPGs? There's a lot to kind of unpack there, and they're all there's so much overlap between these things. And you see, they put they'll put skill trees in shooters and stuff. Does that make them RPGs? When your choices really matter, does that automatically mean a game is an RPG? We see Far Cry games that start with like big important choices. Which way will you go? Which character do you pick? What do you want your outfit to look like? Where do you put your skill points? And there's still like well, then there's the further question: is that a shooter or is that an open world game? That said, I do think we've seen certain trends and certain types of games do come and go as time passes. It is a really good time for RPGs, and I'm definitely not complaining about that. I think that's killer. It makes me really happy to see something as truly an RPG as Baldur's Gate 3 be as popular as it is, and something that is as robust of an experience as CD Projekt Red's games, which are really leaning heavily on the role-playing aspect. I remember there being there's some valid criticisms leveled at Skyrim, because that's kind of that's a sandboxy game, and there are role-playing mechanics, but it's also so heavily kind of action focused that there are choices, but a lot of them sort of it's a very, very wide linear rather than like a fully branching path that goes. The Witcher 2, for instance, depending on a choice you make in the middle of that game, you don't see one half of that game, and that's the kind of thing we see left and right with these big heavy duty RPGs, which is cool. I like it. Also, I would argue that Pentiment is an adventure game, but there's obviously plenty of role playing going on there. So I'm being annoying. I'm sorry. I'm being pedantic, but it is every year we have this discussion when we talk about action adventure games, because so many games are adventures that have action, and adventure games are a known quantity, but what constitutes action? Because fighting and shooting and racing are all actions, but where do you box that stuff in?
So Max, what would you say are is there a genre you think that is quote unquote winning this generation?
The one that I think we said this jokingly, but I think it's true, and the two big ones are games as a service and remakes. Is that a genre or a business model or just a description of how this thing was
trend,
released?
I guess, but it's come to the point where it probably is a genre.
Yeah, it's a pretty huge commonplace thing that we're seeing a lot, and
one of Sony's first actual next gen only games for PS5 was a remake, Demon's Souls.
Demon's Souls, that's right. Yeah, other notable ones would be obviously, the Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space remake, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, Persona 3 Reload. Even The Last of Us, I guess the first one was the remake, right? So yeah, definitely remakes trending. But what do you think about live service? Because obviously Helldivers 2 was a really big deal, earlier this year. Pal World to some extent too. I don't know. Are there that many other examples of games that were released on consoles during this generation?
It's, more the types of. Actually, this generation is a good question, because we saw those stats of the games that are the most played, and the majority of them are things that came out 6 years ago, like GTA 5 or Rocket League or Fortnite, etc. So the mark of a good games as a service is that it's got a long tail to it and it keeps going, and it keeps the lights on over there. And it's funny because we've seen Fortnite, which began as like a tower defense construction game, like they glued Call of Duty and Minecraft and Dungeon Defenders, or not the other one, the Orcs Must Stay, a tower defense game. They glued all that together, and they made this thing that landed with a thud, and then 20 minutes later they turned it into a battle royale game, and they completely ate PUBG's lunch. PUBG's still going strong. Meanwhile, Fortnite scooped up God knows how many other things and rolled them in there, and now we've got Rock Band, but also racing, but also Rocket League, but also dance parties. Like, is Fortnite a battle royale game, or is it a massive MMORPG, or is it just a social media platform that happens to be video game forward?
Yeah, all of the above.
Battle royale would have been on this list last generation. With that,
for sure.
But not this one, probably, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's been a serious new contender this generation in the past few years for battle royale. Ryan, what are there any other genres you think that are sort of really dominating the conversation this generation?
Yeah, Souls-likes. Souls-likes are, there aren't necessarily a massive quantity. There are plenty of them, but there have been some really good ones, and that's another thing, sort of genre where, to Max's point about RPGs, where Souls-like elements are starting to creep into other things. But, we've had I would say if you took a vote of 100 gamers today of all sort of levels of hardcoreness, from casual gamers to super hardcore gamers, and say what's your game of the year so far in 2024, I think there's a decent chance that the Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree expansion pack might actually win game of the year as an expansion pack, which maybe says a little something about how 2024 has gone so far overall. But that's been a huge one. Wo Long Fallen Dynasty was a big one early last year. I think early last year.
Yeah.
Time is escaping me, but you've got Black Myth Wukong, highly anticipated. That game has done tens of millions of views on IGN. Will the game be good? That still remains to be seen. It's coming out pretty soon. Our previewer, Mitchell, when he played a few hours of it, he came away very, very excited about it. So that's trending in the right direction, and we'll find out about the whole thing soon. Lies of P, that was a big one. We mentioned Demon Souls already. So the Souls-like is quite a thing right now.
A Souls-like is tricky to quantify too, because it's easy to identify, but what constitutes a good one is I liken it to hot sauce, where to a lot of people it's just uncomfortable, like it's just pain, but to someone who really knows their way around it, they're like, oh no, that's got hints of this and hints of that. And Mitchell Saltzman, you throw him at a Souls-like and he'll come back with frame data. Like that dude, cut his teeth playing fighting games. He's extremely good, very, very good at that stuff. I think I see at a lower frame rate than he does. And I can tell you whether or not I like a Souls-like playing it or whether or not it hooks me. But FromSoft has a very specific approach to making these games, and there are plenty of imitators out there, but few and far between are the ones that actually manage to kind of live up to that expectation, I feel like.
Ryan, what of the first-person shooter, that which used to be, maybe two generations ago, used to be
my favorite genre. I've been a first-person shooter guy for forever, and I would have to say I'm a little disappointed with the showing of the FPS so far this generation. Halo Infinite, excellent. It's had its ups and downs on the live service side of it, the sort of multiplayer, ongoing support, but the campaign was excellent. I reviewed that. I stand by the 9 that I gave that. And then you've had a couple of excellent Destiny 2 expansions, including a super recent one, The Final Shape, although, yes, Destiny 2 is a first-person shooter and a live service game. It's kind of the live service game, or at least the original one, really. But High on Life was a fun little kind of, I don't want to say surprise, but kind of an indie-ish hit that debuted on Xbox, December of last year, I think that was. And
I love that
had a
game.
lot of fun with that. But
Ryan, I'm right there with you. Like this is the 90s single player first person shooter is it's not extinct, but it's really endangered, because
agreed.
I feel like so often when people go to the trouble of making an FPS, the amount of effort that takes to make a really polished single player campaign, and I'm really dying for Ken Levine and whatever the next BioShock project is to prove me wrong in this department. But yeah, I think so often developers and publishers are like, well, we could also try to get more blood from this stone by throwing in roguelike mechanics or leaning into single player or making it co-op. And it's just, there's something so special about a fairly linear little adventure where you're, in first person right there.
Yeah. And Doom Eternal was last gen. It was it was March of 2020. That was one of that and Animal Crossing were our two kickoff games for the pandemic that kept us entertained for a while. So, they've updated it to take advantage of Series X and PS5, but yeah, like the Dark Ages is coming up, and Half-Life Alyx is a PC game, so that's not even really part of this conversation. It's VR, but yeah, the FPS, there have been, and even Call of Duty, they show up every year, of course, but this generation, there hasn't. Modern Warfare 3, thumbs down to that campaign.
Yeah.
The last
Machine Games has been working on Indiana Jones.
Right, and that's hopefully that should be this year. So there's some stuff to look forward to. But yeah, the FPS, man, it's been a not ideal start here 4 years into this generation.
Where does Far Cry land for you? Because that has definitely scratched the itch of the single player first person shooter experience that I was after, but it also is so squarely an open world game. It's totally a different type of experience, but it's a first person shooter.
I'll be honest with you, Max. For my personal interest in Far Cry peaked at 3. 3 I thought was just kind of nailed everything. Story, the open world activities, the sort of in the camps that you could go, take out any way you chose, either loud or stealth. And it's kind of just been riffing off of that same Far Cry 3 formula for the last number, just changing the setting. And I know that's really that's minimizing it in an unfair way, and I don't.
No, I mean I've played
every
one of them since then, and I'm still chasing that high. Far Cry 3 was phenomenal.
Yeah, but yeah, to answer your question, the Far Cry games, while perfectly good, have just not quite scratched the itch for me.
I mean, I have jokingly said when we were planning this episode, Cyberpunk is a first-person shooter a lot of the time, depending how you play it. You don't have to be, but it is. There is definitely an emphasis on shooting guns in there, which is, I think, partially due to the setting, a little bit of a lampoon of America. But there's a lot of shooting in there. It's interesting because the FPS, again, I think it was. We all have those fond memories of 90s shooters, and I don't know, Dark Forces just got a remaster, the Star Wars game, which was. That came out neck and neck with Doom 2.
94.
And it's so weird going back and revisiting it because you get these labyrinthian levels to the point that they're not really fun. They're kind of there's that old joke about the modern level design versus classic level design, where one is just like a long hallway with a thing at the end, and back in the day it would be this elaborate mandala you'd have to run around grabbing keys in. And I don't know, there've been improvements in a lot of ways. Also throwing in mechanics that shake things up. And we've seen Call of Duty do that, where they sprinkle in, a little bit of stealth, or, maybe you don't just go in a straight line. There's a little bit of branching paths.
Daemon, can I give you another one that's really disappointed me?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one that's usually first out of the gate to really be yay, new generation of consoles. Racing games. Racing games that have barely, there practically aren't any third-party ones anymore, or at least not anywhere near what there used to be. Codemasters would show up with 4 different. They'd Colin McRae, Dirt, and F1, and F1's still going. They're not totally out of the game or anything, but Gran Turismo 7, great game, and it's gotten good ongoing support, but came out for PS4, and I don't think it looks amazing. It doesn't look bad by any stretch, don't get me wrong, but it didn't really raise the bar for me visually like I would have expected on a PS5 coming from the PS4. That's probably because it's a cross-gen game. And then there's Forza Motorsport, the total next-gen reboot that does leave the Xbox One behind, and it's super pretty, but that one struggled a little bit with its ongoing support and still trying to find its footing as a platform, rather than because there presumably isn't going to be a Forza Motorsport 2. They're just going to continue to build on Motorsport as kind of an ecosystem. So the racing game is usually the first thing we point to is, wow, look what my new console can do. And this generation, I feel like the racing game has not really held up its end of the bargain this gen.
I adored Forza Horizon 5. I would point to that to be like, look at how cool this looks. And I remember, oh, right, this is actually backwards compatible. It's just being smart delivered to my system here.
Yeah. Right. And great game of the year, 2021 for us at IGN. And I'll be stoked for the next Forza Horizon whenever that shows up. But you're right. It's that FH5 was a cross-gen.
I mean, it's gonna be a while, because to our point, Playground Games is making Fable, which is an RPG. So
Second team though. Second team. There's still a Forza team. So I'm sure a lot of them are kind of moving over to Fable to help get it done next year. But hopefully it won't be too much longer for Horizon 6. I would imagine it won't be next year, because they probably would have at least announced it already. It's probably going to be at least 2026.
Max mentioned stealth as sort of it's sort of become a feature in a lot of different games instead of its own genre these days. And really the only entry I could think of is Hitman 3 being a notable entry in the stealth genre. But I wonder if it is because in so many of these sort of action adventure games that we mentioned, stealth is an option to play through if not the entire game, a good chunk of it, right? So it's almost like that whole genre has just been adapted into other games.
Unfortunately, my understanding anyway from talking to people back in the day is that as much critical acclaim as Splinter Cell got, and it's still one of my favorite franchises, and theoretically, I will be first in line if the Splinter Cell remake ever actually gets done, which is supposedly in development right now. But Splinter Cell at least never sold the way, like it sold a pittance compared to other Tom Clancy games, the Ghost Recons, the Rainbow Sixes of the world. And I don't know, I mean, Metal Gear, I'm not sure, those I think always sold quite well, but yeah, the stealth as a primary genre does seem to have kind of fallen victim to market trends. But you're right, like we've got Assassin's Creed Shadows, which seemingly can be played largely as a stealth game. I just had the privilege of playing 4 hours of Star Wars Outlaws. That preview's on IGN or our YouTube channel now, and that can absolutely be a stealth game if you want it to be. So at least there's some hope out there for us stealth game fans.
That Splinter Cell remake, is that ever coming out? There are a lot of Ubisoft games you could say.
What will come out first? Beyond Good and Evil 2, Splinter Cell remake, or My Own Death? Which one is going to happen first? Hopefully not My Own Death.
There was also a game called Wild many years ago that had a very cool trailer. Look it up if you don't know that one. The last genre I wanted to bring up was the 3D platformer. Alas, I think Astro's Playroom has been the only notable entry there, but at least we're getting Astrobot next month, which looks very, very cool. Viewers, if there are any sort of genres that you feel like we didn't mention that are either doing really well this generation or not doing very well, make sure to let us know in the comments. We have the results of the poll from last episode. We asked you, what is your favorite controller these days? Very simple question. And the winning result, 46% of votes was the PS5 DualSense. That'd be followed by the Xbox wireless controller with 19%, then the Xbox Elite controller, 16.6%, but then the PS5 DualSense Edge with only 9.8%. So PS5 players like their controller more, but they don't like the Elite version as much as Xbox players like their Elite controller. And then the Switch Pro controller is at the bottom, 8.7%. New poll for you to vote on for next episode. What is a dead genre you'd like to see return? Action sports games like NBA Jam, music rhythm games like Rock Band, light gun games like House of the Dead, extreme sports games like Tony Hawk, Toys to Life like Skylanders. A lot of pieces will have to fall in place for Toys to Life to come back. Or shmups like Gradius. I know what I'm voting for. Make sure to vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live, and we'll share the results with you next episode. And that's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Max and Ryan. Thank you to Jobert, working behind the scenes to make this episode possible. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with more on the latest gaming hardware. We'll see you then.